All right. I am really looking forward to this episode. I'm kind of on a streak here with legal work and the fitness business. And I think this is going to be an interesting episode because Madison is here with us and she has the, I think, very unique distinction of being in our business, the fitness business, but also being a lawyer, which I thought, man, what a great combination. I hadn't seen this before. And so Madison's going to break down some really cool stuff related to a really important topic, which is the legalities of fitness and certainly about protections, how we can protect ourselves better. Something we don't think about, we should be thinking about a lot more. Madison, thank you for joining me in the podcast.
I'm super grateful to be here.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your journey first, because I just think it's so unique that you are kind of living in both of these worlds and let the audience know how you got involved in both of these things in such unique fashion here.
Yeah. So I'll walk it back to when I was just a little girl dreaming for my big dream life that I, you know, could conceptualize to my fullest extent, which I started out at 13 saying that I wanted a job where I could talk a lot, direct cute, and help people. And so I determined, like, at that day that I was going to be an attorney and just started telling everybody that I was going to be a lawyer and stuck to the plan, obviously, which was super cool. And fitness and wellness, meditation, yoga found me when I was about 16. I always played sports and did things like that, but I really started like my own fitness journey around 16. And loved it so much. And then I fell in love with group fitness and was like the person that the other group fitness instructors would always be like, "Oh, you're new to class, like go stand by Madison. She'll help you out the entire time." And finally, one of my instructors who I went to his class like 5 days a week, was all in, totally obsessed. He was like, "You should probably like do this. You should probably like become the instructor at some point in time." And so that's how I ended up in leading group fitness. I was like, "Yeah, perfect. I'll go get my certifications." And that was right at the same time that I was doing my law school applications and preparing to go to law school. So I literally became a fitness instructor and a law student at the exact same time. So the relationship has been married from the beginning, which is super cool. And as an attorney, how many attorneys do you know? How many attorney friends do you have? How many attorney people in your family do you know that are happy and grounded and healthy? And so I was determined to continue to walk that path of being a happy, healthy human, stepping into, an intense law school program and industry in my career that is systemically not happy and not physically and emotionally well. And so becoming a group fitness instructor really gave me those roots to just kind of keep being my best self and not succumb my entire identity into becoming a law student and eventually a lawyer. It can really suck you up. So that's how I just kind of married those two worlds together throughout. I was one of a kind throughout law school. I was the only person that I knew that was working in general, but I was a group fitness instructor at different gyms, including at 45 and then a local boxing gym and things like that. And it just gave me a lot of energy to be able to go do my best work as a law student and then eventually into being an attorney.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Man, I have so many questions. I'm starting to think about when you were going through your journey to become an attorney and while you're working as a fitness instructor, did you start to think about the legal elements of fitness while you were doing that? Like, hey, there's something here I need to be thinking about, or start to kind of materialize as I move forward?
I think for me, what I recognized most was just the business aspect of being an independent coach or running a franchise studio, and just kind of tuning into the different business sides of things. I also, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona. We're a very health, wellness, community oriented place here. And there's a lot of turnover in the gym
Mhm.
scene and fitness and wellness scene. There's a lot of studios that open and close and coaches that, start and fail. And I was just really tuning into the difficulties for fitness instructors in running their business, which obviously the legal foundation of that is an essential component, and being smart and covering your apps and all of those ways is part of running your business in general. And so just kind of seeing gaps in that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen this. Well, one, turnover is just atrocious in the fitness industry. It has been like that for a long time. I mean, the majority of gyms run through 80% of their staff in an entire year. It's a churn and burn industry, unfortunately, as you have people coming out of some whatever version of education they have. They have almost no legal education coming out. I was very fortunate. I had a lot of it coming out of college for fitness, which was, I actually had a class that was the legalities of fitness and sports management. It was taught by a lawyer, a practicing lawyer. I took it for 4 months, and as it went and during my master's degree, it was incredible. But I realized also later that this is not happening for most people for
Mm.
that, and so you're not, you're totally right. There's a real issue. Now, when we think about places that are failing or closing and stuff, what are some of the legal gaps that you've seen or that you think that there's going on that are maybe part of the cause of this?
Yeah. So, if there's any type of injury that happens due to somebody working out in your facility or your coaching program, and you don't have like the proper measures in place with good liability waivers, contracts, or insurance, you could go bankrupt with one torn ACL. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
that's not going to put somebody who's running a fitness business in a great position if they don't have their liabilities protected and covered. And then, it's ultimately not going to be the thing that puts you out of your business if your legal not intact, but it's definitely going to be one of the many problems that contributes to your business just not being run and treated like a business if you aren't addressing the business side of the law firm side of running your business.
So, from your perspective as a lawyer and also someone who's in the business, what are just some ground level things that someone who is, there's two different things, like someone who's owning a gym, business owner, um, and someone who is an independent fitness pro. What are some things they need to think about on a very basic level, just to start us off with that?
Yeah, and honestly, I think they're kind of the same, whether you have a studio with multiple locations or you're just a single online fitness coach with a couple different program offers. So basics is you need to have a limited liability company. That's something you register in your state. Then you go get an EIN, which is your tax ID number, and a business bank account, and you keep all of your money completely separate from your personal life. That's going to be numero uno essential in protecting yourself as a fitness instructor, is just keeping your personal assets and your business assets and anything related to your business completely separate. So every single person who is exchanging some kind of service for money should have an LLC filed. That's going to be the number one thing you can do to protect yourself. Um, Step number two is contracts. Obviously having your liability waiver tight and clean and signed every single time is going to be essential. You do not want to get yourself caught in a situation where somebody does get hurt, or even if it's not injury specific. Let's say you take photos and videos of you make content with your classes or with your individual client, and they haven't signed a media release, like that's something that should be included in that initial waiver. That's going to be an essential for every single class offering, every single coaching session, every single private training session. No matter what, you have to have your client signing a liability waiver. I think people get really caught up in like, oh, I don't want to be like that formal. It's like a weird vibe. And it's like, you're running a business. You need to treat it like you're running a business, and people have respect for that. So I do a lot of encouraging of people who kind of have that mindset of like, oh, I'm not that serious. Like, well, then people are going to treat you like you're not that serious, and that's going to contribute to your business not succeeding in the long run. Another essential contract would be like a membership agreement or a service agreement. making sure you have those payment terms really clear and formalized. It is important to be direct and clear and set those boundaries with your clients about what's included, what they're receiving in exchange for how much, whether you're on like a 30-day cancellation policy or whatever that might be, just having all of that super clear. And then finally, the thing that I don't think most people in general in business know about, but it's relevant to the fitness industry, especially because of how much overlap there is and kind of the like buzzwords around fitness, but trademarking your business name, your coaching name, your studio name, and having protection around the brand that you're building. There are what you probably know the stat like millions of fitness instructors and fitness businesses. And the one thing that sets us all apart is the name of our brand and what you're putting out into the world. And people don't realize that there's actually a federal database where you register that name called the Federal Trademark Database, and you have to protect it and actually own it. So that helps up people up for success too, so that they don't build up this great big reputation and then have to change it later because somebody else beat them to it and they have to like start from scratch with a whole new name.
Do you have, I'm curious about this. I've had many LLCs in my life for different businesses and things. And um, I know there's definitely certain differences in terms of the ease of creating your LLC in certain states, the startup costs, the annual report fees, all those things. Any basically advice on that, and in terms also physically, but also if someone is working online and they want to start an LLC, is it advantageous to be in their home state or is it advantageous to be in other states? Just some information related to that.
Yeah, so there's nuances whenever you grow and expand into different sizes of companies and corporations and things like that, sort of like relevant state law and things. But ultimately, the advice I give to clients is file in the state that you live, keep it simple. You do file in your individual state, right? And there, like you said, there's different filing fees and different requirements for every single state. And you just want to be like in your own hub. Your contracts are also governed by whatever state that you put them in, and that's typically where you want to be located because, God forbid you end up in court, it's gonna be in the state that your contract
That's right.
abide by, and it's like complicated and messy if your LLC's in one state and your contract's governed by another. That's very doable and possible, but things just get messy. So I always recommend to people to just file in the state that you're in, regardless of the process, regardless of the filing fees. Some states are more complicated than others, like you said, but that's going to be the easiest thing whenever it comes to having a statutory agent, which is a requirement for
Mm.
LLCs, and like all the other little steps that come along with like needing an address in the state that you filed in. You're going to get yourself in like a bigger mess if you try and take some Instagram advice that's not from an attorney and file in the state of Delaware or Wyoming or something. I clean up a lot of messes like that and bring them back to people's home states all the time.
Thank you for that. That was great. I want to move on to insurance here. Now, often for a lot of fitness pros, when they're working for an employer situation, the insurance is taken care of by the facility, generally speaking. But we have a lot of fit pros who listen to this who are on the entrepreneurial track. And I think it'd be very important to discuss the importance of insurance as a protective agency for pros.
And yeah, that's like not really my wheelhouse because I want to give you the most protection
Sure,
through your
sure.
contract, which is dental. But in general, just having a general liability insurance policy, it's not going to be that much of an investment. There's so
Yeah.
many different websites out there that you can just get something to have your ass covered, just in case. We are fitness. There's a few industries that are well, there's many, but there's a few industries that I'm typically dealing with that are high risk, high liability. And fitness is one of them. Just the possibility of injury is high, right? And hopefully you do have a good enough relationship with people that they don't blame you,
Right.
but it's possible and you just want to be better safe than sorry. So, just carrying a general liability insurance at the very least, it's not going to cost you that much and it's very much worth it. Same insurance and legal, it's the same. It's like investing in the front end is
Mhm.
going to save you later. Cheap now, expensive later is what they say.
I always say too, it's actually kind of like fitness is very similar in just your own personal well-being. You're going to pay one way or another. You can pay now or you can pay later. And in terms of personal well-being, that cost is usually a skyrocketing healthcare cost or hospitalization versus the investment of either working with a pro or membership, whatever. There's a cost required either way. This sounds very similar with that. I think what's difficult for a lot of fit pros is it's such a part-time profession for so many people. So I think they struggle to see themselves as professionals in this sense of how we're talking of like, oh, I have a business, but I just kind of do it on the side. And it sounds like you're saying, and I'm all for this, that regardless of how much you're working in it, the protection is critically important, no matter what level you're at with it.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, even if it's justified hustle, you're still exchanging your time and energy, which is extremely valuable for money. And you're going to open yourself up to the same amount of risk and liability as somebody who's doing it full time. It's obviously just scaled on like the amount of people that you are serving.
Do you ever, again, you may not do this, but is there ever a conversation, again, being someone who's in the business, about certification and liability, and particularly lapse of certification? I see this actually way too much for pros who let their certification lapse and continue to work with people. Any comments on that legally?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm actually kind of of a different mindset that you don't necessarily need a certification to in all kinds of things, right? So I'm also like a sound healer and I host
Right.
and facilitate sound baths. And a lot of people like feel like they can't even start doing something like that until they have a certification. Or to teach breath work or to teach this or to teach that. And I think it gives you credibility, but it's not necessarily something that's required. I'm not sure. You might know something different from like a liability perspective. I'm happy to like have a
Yeah, it's
conversation
definitely
about it if there's
required.
something that you do know about
It's definitely
it.
required in the majority of gyms, you have to have the certification. And part of it is too, and I've seen some judgments on this as well. I had a great education on this in my master's degree and stuff, and I've always kept up with it. I know there is a recent judgment, and I think it was this Erie case where basically when they went to discovery, they looked at did the certification. It was a negligence case. Did they have did the person who was conducting the service, the person got injured, much like you would say someone get injured, and they had let their certification lapse. And during that, the insurance wouldn't pay out because of that. And it ended
Mm,
up bankrupting the person. And so the certification part is pretty important, especially gyms should be making sure that trainers, fitness coaches have it, that it's up to date, as the gyms can get in big trouble. But one thing is people working independent like myself, if you don't have a certification, it's the standard of care. What would a reasonably prudent personal trainer do? They would be certified through a reputable organization. I was just asking. I know this is not your area. I was just generally just kind of like, oh, I wonder what your thoughts are for that because I think we don't think about the law until a problem happens for people,
mhm.
and that is, I think that's just a backwards way of looking at it. It's like, well, I don't need this. The cost is prohibitive to recertify. Again, you're gonna pay one way or another. It's just
Mhm.
when do you wanna take that hit? Early or late,
Yeah, very true. Very
So,
true.
yeah, I just think it's, I'm just seeing a trend of this, of independent professionals just letting their certification lapse and still working with people and having 0 clue about the law related to it.
Yeah, interesting. I definitely from a gym perspective, I know, they typically require certifications to be
Yeah.
had and kept up. So it's just a matter of managing those and keeping up on your trainers that you're managing as the business
Yeah.
owner.
Talk a little bit more about kind of, waivers and if and forms are they all created equal, or is there a difference that people should be aware of in the business for that?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great question. They're definitely not all created equal, especially in the world of AI, which
Mm,
I'm very pro AI, love it, but I'm also using it with a law degree backing it, right? And knowing what questions to ask, knowing what language to look for. You mentioned case law. Just because the law exists in some way doesn't mean that that's how the law is being applied in
mm,
actual court.
yeah.
And I can tell you right now that ChatGPT doesn't even know the law. The AI programs, they're not getting the law right and they're not incorporating the law right, right? And
Interesting.
they're very much over promising and under delivering. And for somebody who doesn't have the legal lens or the legal expertise, they don't know what they're missing. And so
Mm,
they're opening themselves up to as much risk as if they don't have anything at all, most likely. And just it's such a simple document. A liability waiver technically should only be about 1 page, 1 to 2 pages max. It should be very clearly written. I'm trying to think. I think the legal standard is that it should be written as if it's being written to like somebody with an eighth grade education or something like that. So it should still be very simple, plain language. It's not like it needs to be filled with legal jargon. Like, don't go tell your AI to like beef it up with some legal jargon. That's not going to necessarily help you. It's actually going to hurt you. But there's just a few things that need to be incorporated to make it legitimate. How it's being signed, most of us are using probably, almost everybody is using
yeah.
some kind of booking platform or something like that. And there's certain language that needs to be incorporated into it to make it a click wrap agreement where it can just be like clicked to sign. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot of floppy AI work being done out there, especially in the contract world right now. And just trust me, I'm very pro AI, but
Yeah.
that's not the place to be doing it when it comes to your legal protection.
So let me get this right. I want to make sure I'm recapping this. Are you saying that there are professionals that are using things like ChatGPT to create these contracts or liability forms? And because they don't have the legal lens, they're just maybe their prompts are not well done to cover that for that. So there's a risk in trying to create your own forms because you don't know actually what would be appropriate on there from the legal lens.
Yeah, 100%. That's it. And even if your prompt was like thebond.com, which I'm all in, like I love a good long prompt, having AI give you the expert prompt, it's still gonna miss the essential legal components that are necessary to make something enforceable. So that's gonna be something that's gonna be really interesting coming up in the world of law. A lot of people are getting something signed, but is it enforceable? Probably not.
Mm. So what is the enforceable part that's usually missing for people in this case?
Booth. That's a good question. Um, in terms of the liability waiver, it might just be like the overall consent language around it and like the clarity around what they are agreeing to release.
Mm,
That people are probably also putting too much for relief in their liability waiver. So, you can't actually have somebody waive away all of their rights.
right.
Um, there's also the enforceability side of any liability waiver that, like, if somebody died because you did something negligent, right, you're still going to be held accountable
That's
for
right.
that. And so
That's right.
there's going to be probably contracts out there, liability waivers out there that attempt to waive more than what is waivable. And that's probably going to get people into a lot of trouble in the future.
That's a great answer, actually, because I have seen this where fit professionals think I have this waiver, it's ironclad, like no matter what, I'm good. And that's definitely not true. You could still be held liable for certain things. It's not an ironclad thing. So yeah, I thought that was awesome. There's almost kind of this will just cover me. I'm good. I'm covered. Type of thing.
Right. Yeah, and something I tell people too is, like, ultimately, you can never prevent somebody from suing you. You know, people will be
Right.
like, "Oh, this won't get me sued, right?" And I'm like, "Well, no, even if it's something that's technically you shouldn't be sued for, you still can't prevent somebody from suing you. If there's an attorney out there that wants to take somebody's money and take on a case, they will, and they'll raise hell, you know what I mean? And there's always a chance in this world that you could be
Yeah.
held accountable or sued for anything that you do, unfortunately.
I tell you, I train several lawyers currently. I ran a club for 10 years in a super luxury-based, residential community with nothing but lawyers living there, I swear. And so and then I took courses with this, and so I've just had so much respect for understanding this area, with it. It's just the people can be litigious. I don't think trainers
Mhm.
recognize that there are I've seen it in communities where there's just suing, lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, no matter how frivolous it feels, that there is an element you can hit the wrong person who just
Yeah.
doesn't like you gave them some weird side eye during your session,
Yeah.
and there's an issue there. So you can't be careful enough, I think, about it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great message to come through as to why people need to have that limited liability company, especially like you said, all these like side hustles or they're just doing it part-time. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter because if you don't have your business separate from your personal assets and your personal income, so like let's say it is a side gig and a side hustle and you have like a full-time corporate job and a salary and your
Yeah.
house and your car, if you don't have your business assets and your personal assets separate, all of that personal asset is still up for grabs if somebody were to sue you. So all the value that you have outside of your business. And so that's going to be like a number one thing that would impact any trainer that's listening to
Yeah.
this. Even if you have 2 clients a week, still have an LLC no
You
matter
got
what.
should still have the LLC, definitely. Totally agree, and I think one of the other things too is, a lot of trainers struggle with I don't say struggle, but they just don't do an important part of the process, especially which is doing the PAR-Q and the health history questionnaire, which is
Mhm.
important because you could miss a really significant health history issue, that someone could have high blood pressure, hypertension. You don't even know it because you never did the forms for it. I mean, you weren't a reasonably prudent trainer because you didn't actually
Mhm.
know that your client had a diagnosed health condition that will require medication to keep that under control, their heart rate under control. So again, this may not be your area, but I think this also goes into the liability. Like, what's your responsibility with people?
Mhm.
Is that there are a variety of forms, and maybe it feels like a bunch of paperwork and stuff, but again, you're going to pay at some point or another with that, you know?
Yeah, and it can be simplified, right? It doesn't need to be that complicated. Maybe you could offer like here's your check checklist
Yeah.
of like 1, 2, 3, what you need to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe you could offer that to people. Another thing that comes to mind in that lane is disclaimers.
Mm,
You're not a medical professional. You're
right.
not a therapist. We all know what it really means to be a trainer
Okay.
and like the conversations that are had, right? And the
Yeah.
communication that we become an expert in all different kinds of things related to humans and human behavior, but having that strong disclaimer in your waiver and in your contract is also really important that there are no guarantees and you're not a medical professional, you're not a therapist, you're not a doctor.
Which I think is an even more important thing now because at least when I started, 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information out there. Even when I started, YouTube wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even around. I mean, most social media didn't exist when I started. And now sometimes I think people feel like they're more up to date than they actually are because there's so much information. So they kind of sometimes play the role of a doctor or a therapist because they go,
Mhm.
"Well, I watched a YouTube video on it and how to be, a better
True.
communicator for
Yeah.
that." So I think it's important to be really careful that I state this to my clients all the time. Even I have a doctorate in behavior education and sports and education settings. I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed. I am probably as close as anyone could be to doing that. Even I say this is not my scope of practice. one area where trainers struggle is nutritional advice. Provide. Have you seen anything like this in terms of legal aspects of this and scope of practice? If you haven't, it's fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, nothing related to, like, my clients specifically. I think people
Yeah.
have been pretty good about knowing that they need to be clear that they're not a nutritionist and just giving those proper disclaimers again, right? That they're not a nutritionist, this isn't a nutrition plan, they're not a dietitian. I think those 2 pathways, dietitians and nutritionists, have gotten, like, a pretty strong reputation for meeting those specific
Yeah.
educational requirements and certifications, right? So whatever that industry did to make that very well known to personal trainers and trainers alike, they've done a good job.
Yeah. I actually have some of my personal training students as an activity, they have to look up their state law for nutrition for it. So they know ahead of time before they get in the industry, hey, this is what your state actually requires, what you can and can't say or do as a non-certified or licensed, registered dietitian for that. And they're always surprised. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I'm like, it's kind of the danger here, right? You start peddling
Mhm.
things you don't know anything about. And I think when you're in this business, you want to feel like you know a lot, like all these things to tell your clients. You want to be valuable. But another valuable word is "I don't know," and or phrase. And I'm going to refer you to people who this is what they've studied and are credentialed for.
Mhm.
So I think
Yeah,
it's okay
100%.
to say that.
Yeah, and it's very important as well when it comes to diet and nutrition because of how much it can really impact your body. And
Yeah.
not everybody should be on the same high protein macro plan that they got you
Yeah.
jacked. Like it's people are not created equally.
Most and can do some really big harm for people. I
Yeah.
mean, there's just
Yeah.
huge harm that could be done, but it's still out there. I still see a lot of that. I wanted to dive in kind of this last part a little bit because I think you're uniquely qualified for this. And we talked a little about this kind of the online brand based environment. And you talked about media releases. Anything else within that environment of social media, online work that maybe content creators aren't thinking about that will help protect them a bit more?
And there's a lot of crossover between content creators and people in the fitness space, right? So we know that there's that merriment in that community. And that's actually one of my niche clienteles in my law firm at Sunshine Law Firm is working with content creators. And very similarly to fitness professionals, it's encouraging them to treat it like a business and to legitimize themselves by having an LLC, the contract for their brand deal, following the FTC guidelines. That's important for anybody who's outward facing and doing brand deals. Part of why we have our fitness and wellness community is because of the access to sponsorships and freebies and all kinds of good stuff like that. And it's really important that we are doing what we're supposed to do and following through on our commitments to the brands and vice versa, right? But yeah, again, just kind of the same concepts, treating themselves like a business, acting like they are professionals in the sense of having contracts signed, keeping things formal and in writing, having that LLC to make sure that their money is staying separate from their other monies, their personal assets, and then outward facing, putting that brand out that is protected is going to be really important for content creators as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important because we're just in an environment where actually a lot of fitness pros, they're whether this is right or not wrong, that's not for me to decide, but they're just focusing a lot on going from getting a certification to right into online work or just content creation.
Mm.
And this can feel kind of like a Wild West situation of like not even thinking about the legal aspect. I think if you're not thinking about it in person, you're definitely not thinking about it online for a lot of people
Yeah.
as well. So that's what I think this is an area that so many people are entering that space and not understanding their legal responsibility into that, and that it's just not some scot-free thing here.
Right. Especially when it comes to people's bodies, right? This is like
Right.
high stake
Right.
for real. I think just really emphasizing that is really important. If anything, out of this conversation is like being a fitness trainer, working with the human body is a high risk industry. Not that it should deter you from
Yeah.
doing it. We obviously need more health and wellness across the board,
Yeah.
but people absolutely need to be treating it like a legitimate profession and business and high risk.
Yeah. I think that that high risk part is not thought about enough within the business. Again, this may not be something I just that you're dealing with, but I'm thinking about what's the responsibility of online content creators and pushing products, let's say nutritional supplementation, saying things that are knowingly potentially hurtful to people. I'm curious, just throwing up the air, what's the legal responsibility there? It's because I often don't hear if something happens legally for that. There's lots of NDAs and things of that nature and settlements, but I wonder, do people even think about the stuff that comes out of their mouths and like, well, maybe I'm opening myself up to a lot of risk here?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope people were using that kind of foresight, but unlikely. The larger your platform is, the larger your follower count is, the more risk you're gonna be carrying, right? Because the
Yeah.
more impact you're gonna be having. But there's, definitely laws about false and misleading information out there. That it is very easy to get sued for if you walk somebody down the wrong path and they end up with consequences because of it, which is called damages in the world of the law. You can be held responsible. So, making sure you are clear in what you're saying, talking about things like opinion based rather than fact based. Um, being clear if a product is like FDA approved or not. There's a lot of stuff out there about that kind of stuff, where there's just a lot of nuance and a lot of gray area that just needs to be clear. But yeah, I'm sure most influencers and content creators aren't thinking about that, but just being conscious of everything you're saying in general is so important. And then maybe just running a little checklist in your head about what could be problematic legally would be helpful to a lot of people.
Most definitely. Well said. Well, Madison, thank you so much for your time. A lot of really good nuggets of information there that kind of dove inside beyond just kind of the general boilerplate stuff, which I thought it was great. Everyone should definitely check out. I love Madison's website, by the way. Really well done, fun, bright, energetic, and I think current, which is great. So please tell everyone how they can connect with you, website included, and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sunshine Law Firm is my law firm on Instagram. My personal page is Life Coach Lawyer. That's where you can kind of see like my fitness and wellness, just my whole balanced life as both a fitness instructor, a mom, and an attorney. And then my law firm website is sunshinelawfirm.net. One thing that might be really helpful to your audience is I have a template liability waiver for sale that includes everything that I know as a fitness instructor is required and is a safe bet for instructors to use, whether they're online, in person, running any kind of different modality. It includes all of those things, has like a hands on consent portion to it, that media release portion to it. And then I also sell a template retreat waiver for the fit pros out there that are taking people on retreats. It's a retreat contract that lays out all the terms because taking people across the country or across the world um, comes with its own risks too. So those two things might be great offers for your community. And those are both on my website, sunshinelawfirm.net.
Awesome. I love that you have those forums on there. I think that's going to be so valuable for our audience. Thank you so much, Madison, for coming on and giving me some of your time. And everybody's on a whirlwind of a busy life, I feel like. So the fact that we slowed down and did this together is of great value to me and to the audience. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to chat.